Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yeah, here I am. Hi. Good morning. Oh, God. Good morning. Again, just to reiterate, we are broadcasting from the city paper offices downtown. But this is on a interim basis, waiting for our all-new studio, which will come also with an alliance with a surprising entity. That's all I'm going to say. But that comes in about, a week, two, something like that. You can't nail us down, I'll tell you that right now. We equivocate constantly. All right, so I'll just start with what's right on my email here. Beth writes that she got this labor notice this morning. And what it is from the great state of Missouri, actually, and the largest city in Missouri, St. Louis, did pass a minimum wage increase for workers inside the St. Louis city limits. They brought it up to $10 an hour, and that would have kicked in this year. And it was to increase to $11 an hour in January. That was about a $2.20 an hour raise for people making minimum wage. Well, the Republican-led state legislature has now passed a law that prohibits local governments, such as St. Louis, from setting a higher minimum wage than the state requires. And so the state trumps the municipality, and employers doing business in St. Louis are going to have to take money away from all of their minimum wage employees. Can you imagine? You've worked, their set rate is $7.70 an hour. You're toiling for $7.70 an hour. You get an extraordinary gift of a raise up to $10 an hour, which you've had for a little while now. You're getting used to that bigger paycheck, and now they're going to take it away. This is Republican governance again, and it is happening in legislatures all over the country. I'm not aware, but I suspect there is a similar bill pending and or in the I don't know about Pennsylvania. What we do know is these laws come out, as Beth suggests, of these right-wing think tanks, corporate-run think tanks. And they write up this legislation and send it off to their lackeys, their representatives in state legislatures all over the country, who then pretend that they have drafted this legislation, stick their name on it, stick it in the hopper, and off it goes and becomes law. Which is to say that state legislatures are not representing the people who elected them. They are representing lobbyists for corporate interests, and they make there's no apology. There's nothing. They don't even bother covering their tracks. So this is Republican governance. On the other hand, another note I got here from Russ saying, could you talk about the leadership of the Democratic Party? It seems to me they're doing the same thing they did to lose the election last time, and that is thinking everyone's just going to hate the Republicans so much they will automatically vote Democrat. I think Russ is correct in his assessment. I really do. And I don't know what to tell you. I think I told you before, I'm a Democrat, a registered Democrat, because I live in Pittsburgh, PA, and I found, after being shut out of the primary election the first year I was here, because I was an independent, because I hadn't chosen a party, that I saw that if I wanted to be enfranchised in Pittsburgh, I had to become a Democrat so I could vote in mayoral elections and, have a voice. And also, the Democratic Party, more so than the Republican Party, tends to support issues of importance to me. But it is as lackluster, lackadaisical, and messed up a party. I don't know if as the Republicans are. I don't know. But I don't feel a great deal of allegiance to it. They inspire no. I don't know. I'm another one of the millions of Americans who so turned off by our parties, the establishment parties. It's why Bernie Sanders attracted such a crowd, and it's why Donald Trump. There were a reason those two did, because they both stood independent of one of the two parties. Donald Trump is not a registered Republican. Bernie Sanders is not a registered Democrat. So there's a whole ton of folks like me who would really like to shake up the current party system. I don't have a clue. I'm not good at organizational stuff. I really don't have a clue. Smarter folk than I are going to have to figure out how we begin to alter this party and to make it, again, a party of the people. We started divvying up, putting all of us into little jars, and it's the identity politics thing, and I think it's harmed us more than it's helped us. It's not that I'm against treating people with equanimity, equality, and respect, but in terms of winning national elections, we have turned off sizable groups like white people. That's a big group. Even if they are diminishing somewhat, it's still a big group. That's all Donald Trump has, white folk. That's what he's got in his corner. And they're hanging true to him. Man, if you look at the polls where 40% of Americans say impeach the son of a bitch, and 56% of Americans say that he's unfit for office, and yet Republicans, they love him. By huge, still, up in the 70 percentile. Still, as of today. You ask a room full of Republicans, 70+% of them will say, love the guy. That's my guy. That's the president I want. And that is why you see all the profiles in craven cowardiceness by the Republican members of Congress. They're afraid to stand up against Trump because their voters like him. And I don't know what we do. I really don't know what we do. Who is this? That's not it. I'm looking for something that Krugman said today. Paul Krugman. He said, look, all we get from the elected Republicans, the vast, vast majority, oh, sure, you get a little one here and a little one daring to say something specifically negative about Donald Trump there, but they vote with him. They're still voting. They're still enabling. So all we get are these off-the-record expressions of horror and dismay and denunciations of bigotry in a very general sense, not naming names. And Krugman says this, look, and it's indisputable. The fact is that white supremacists have long been a key, if unacknowledged, part of the grand old party in this modern era. They used to be a huge part of the Democratic Party until a guy, a Southerner, a Texan, Lyndon Baines Johnson, signed the Civil Rights Act, knowing full well that he'd send all of those Southern white racists running to the Republicans. It was just a complete reversal. And black people who had voted Republican up until that point, because it was the party of Lincoln, the emancipator, they immediately, bang, to the Democratic Party. So that Civil Rights Act was just a huge watershed moment in our national politics. And the Republicans have been dog whistling and horse whispering and to that crowd ever since. It's had names like Southern Strategy and things like that. Nixon was really good at it. Reagan was good at it. They all know how to do it. George H.W. Bush, the good senior Bush, was good at it. It was his campaign that ran the Willie Horton ad. So, we cannot look to the Republicans in Congress for help. We just can't. Ain't gonna happen. It's hard, Krugman says, to imagine anything up to and including evidence of collusion with a foreign enemy power like Russia that would make these cowards in Congress risk losing an election, risk offending their bigots, their bigoted base. Our only hope is that we somehow survive till the midterm elections of next year. That's a year and a half away, folks. We somehow stumble toward those elections, and somehow the Democratic Party does what it has never done in my memory, which is have a massive voter turnout in a non-presidential election. And we take back the House. I don't know. Otherwise, they're unrestricted till 2020. And maybe beyond. I don't know. So, that'd be it. There's so much to talk about. I just, I'm starting to lose my mind, I think, again. And I got the strangest email from one of you who says you're a fan, but you accuse me of being conservative? I mean, I read it sort of quickly, but it blew me away. Andy wrote, that I have a new attitude. Yeah, maybe, a new attitude. Well, that was because I was on vacation for so long that I realized there's life beyond constantly reading all this crap and thinking about it and worrying about it. And Andy writes, I've noticed your new take it or leave it attitude regarding national politics. You encourage us to take a break from monitoring Trump. You tell us it feels good to just get on with your life. And like most conservatives, you are hypercritical of Hillary Clinton, a lifelong public servant with years of experience in diplomacy and blah, 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 blah. But you called her terribly flawed. Well, who ain't? She was terribly flawed as a candidate, okay? Not necessarily as a human being. But I have never been a huge fan of the Clintons. Do you understand? You lived through those 8 years when he was president. He didn't make me proud. He make you proud? What a mess in many ways. And I look at some of the troubles we've got now, and you can lay them at Bill Clinton's presidency's doorstep. The fact that you have just a very few corporate owners in charge of our televisions and radios and newspapers. He signed the bill that allowed that to happen when there had been a cap and there had been local ownership in large part of radio stations in this country. You can hardly find a local owner anywhere. If they do, if a local owner exists in radio still in this nation, they're owning some little teeny AM station at the bottom of the dial. The fat cats own it all. Bill Clinton, who signed the Defense of Marriage Act. Bill Clinton, Defense of Marriage Act, huh? His triangulation, his moving of the Democratic Party more toward the center, which in fact got him elected, but which also helped begin the destruction of the Democratic Party, to my mind, as a party that stands for the poor people, the little people. He aligned it more and more with the corporatists, the boardrooms. I'm serious about this. Now, granted, he's not Hillary. I don't want to talk about her. They had their time. Do you understand? They had their time. Goodbye. We need new blood. We need young blood. And its name is not Chelsea Clinton. We need new blood. The Democratic Party. It's not the Clintons. Goodbye. Nice try. Nice shot. I'm sorry. You did get robbed, Hillary. You got robbed and we got screwed. I voted for you. All of that. But there was no reason she lost Wisconsin other than total ineptitude. And you could argue the same of Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania. I'm sorry. It was a badly run campaign with a candidate that far too many Americans lived to hate, thus making Donald Trump a more attractive candidate. Good God. He couldn't pick somebody to run against better than her. Because it's not about, I mean, come on. We've seen our country in action now, the people of our country, the unserious voters of our country, the petulant whiners, all of whom feel aggrieved. It's not easy being a white male. It's tough. And he goes back to say we live in a country where we're lucky to be able to take a break from holding public officials accountable. There are many countries in the world where they don't have that luxury. Your new attitude strikes me as willfully naive and privileged. Well, I assure you my attitude is no different than it ever was. Privileged it might well be, because I am privileged. I've never said otherwise. I've often wondered if I were born into an unprivileged segment of society, what would have become of me? I wouldn't be doing this, I'll tell you that. I'd probably be doing time. That's my guess. I had every privilege. Oh, Lord. What was that tweet that you saw? I'm talking to Alex here, who's Alex, what was the tweet you saw that you thought said it all? I mean, we could paraphrase it. It was how about
something along the lines of
How about-
taking down these
taking down statues
could be added to our
could
history,
be added to
our history.
our historical record. I mean, this idea that taking down the statues destroys our history. No, it adds to our history.
Yeah. And also there's a difference between being in a museum and being on a pedestal in a public place.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Somebody pointed out that if you actually go around to these statues and don't, necessarily look at the beauty of the equestrian, the horse, the flaring nostrils, the brave, soldier atop, read what is written on it, and some of the stuff that's written on some of these statues would curl your hair. So, I mean, we're heading into very scary territory when we start talking about removing all these statues, because there are lots of Americans who aren't even bigots, particularly. They're just misinformed and have grown up in a culture in which these people on those horses and standing there in their Confederate regalia were honorable men. They were taught that in school. They're still being taught it in school. They swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. We screwed up. I understand why it was done. Why after the North won the war, that the feeling was that, by Lincoln, that you don't want to rub the South's face in the defeat. That if we're going to, the idea of winning the war was to keep the country united, the United States of America. So in order to have those rebellious southern states back in the United States of America, you had to not kick them around too much. You'd already shamed them and humiliated them and killed a bunch of them. But now you needed to say, okay, that's done, and welcome them back. We did, that's where we went wrong. That's where we went wrong, because we never came to terms. We allowed the South to rewrite the story. We agreed to let them put statues of their heroes in our Congress. So you go, a black American going to the Congress, to the U.S. Capitol building, walking into Statuary Hall, looks around and sees among those honored an extraordinary percentage of traitors to the Union. Traitors to the Union. Men who actively took up arms in defense of slavery and to sever ties with the nation. And we allow those? Stop and think about it. You go into the United States Capitol building, and one of the guys who's standing there, the one, I don't know all their idiot names, but I do know this name, Jefferson F. Davis. He was the president of the Confederate States of America. He's lucky he wasn't hung. Instead, he's put on a pedestal in the Capitol building of the nation he attempted to destroy. Think about it. We never, it's typical. It's typical. We let the wrong-headed people tell the story. Pick the words. Create the narrative. And we've learned a lot because of this latest thing about the statues. We've learned that most of these statues went up from 1875 into the 1920s. Okay, long after the war. They went up while the South was trying to make sure that the black folk who lived amongst them understood their place. They might not literally be owned anymore. Their labor may be actually getting paid a little bit. But all those statues were saying to them, you are here only as long as we allow it. You breathe only as long as we allow it. This is our country. We are supreme. We are superior. That's what they stand for. Wall Street Journal says, okay, so it's called Statuary Hall. It used to be where I think the House of Representatives would meet. And the house got a little too big for that particular room, so they relocated to a larger chamber, and they made what had been the chamber into this Statuary Hall. This was during the Civil War. It was 1864. And a law was enacted that said every state in the Union could choose 2 of its citizens to be honored. So I suppose there's 100 statues in there now. Each state gets 2. I have no idea who's representing Pennsylvania there. We got some potential wonderful people we could have there. But imagine 12 of the people that are honored in our nation's capital, Statuary Hall, were traitors, leaders of the Confederacy. They were traitors fighting to defend their right to buy, own, abuse, and exploit other human beings. 5 are Native Americans. 9 are women. You see, the Confederates have a bigger, obviously most are white. Overwhelmingly white men. Do you know how many blacks are in Statuary Hall as representative of whatever state nominated them to be so honored? You know how many black Americans are in Statuary Hall? None. Oh, I know. Pelosi, while she was Speaker of the House, knocked a statue out and replaced that statue, because she could, with a statue of Rosa Parks. But Rosa Parks is not an official. She's there, but of course, she had to be brought in under, unusual circumstances to stand there representing an entire race of Americans. The Confederates have 12 statues. Black America has 0, with a little asterisk for Rosa Parks. It's shameful. I'm sorry, it's shameful. So I keep thinking, and I have more than once during Trump's tenure, that this has to be a breaking point here. We're at some kind of I think we're at a point where it might start to tip. Why? Now, I've been wrong every single time I've thought that, but I think it a little more now because of just the growing array of powerful institutions and people who are standing up against him and speaking their disgust and their dismay and distancing themselves. I mean, everybody from the head of the Joint Chiefs to the head of every one of our military branches. The commander-in-chief does not have the respect of those he commands. That's big. You got to figure the national security apparatus is terrified of his presidency. The only people who are still behind him and holding him up are congressional Republicans. His businesses are taking a hit. People that used to like the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic, people who used to like have these huge events at Mar-a-Lago, putting unbelievable amounts of dollars in Donald Trump's pockets, are canceling these events. Yesterday saw 3 cancellations of events. So he's getting the American Cancer Society, the Cleveland Clinic, the Palm Beach Chamber of Commerce, for God's sakes. I mean, it's in Palm Beach, and the head of the Palm Beach Chamber of Commerce, guys, that's not a liberal outfit. The Chamber of Commerce has urged businesses not to host any events at Mar-a-Lago. Wow. So it just seems, and let's get this, a line from the main editorial in the Wall Street Journal today. As you know, I only read them while, holding on to something, so I won't swoon. But listen to this penultimate line of their editorial. They're talking about the people at the White House. They're talking about his advisors. They're talking about his cabinet. And they're wondering how long these guys are going to be willing to stand with him. And they say this. The Wall Street Journal says this. Every person has to decide how long he or she can serve in good conscience. The Wall Street Journal. Now, they also then argue that we hope they'll hang in as long as they possibly can so we can get tax breaks. I mean, that's really all that matters to them. But the fact that these corporate chiefs backing away, the fact that, I mean, who's standing with them? The Republicans, the Republican Party, and the KKK, and the bigots. That's who he's got. Who else does he have? You tell me. Did you see what Mitt Romney wrote? It's pretty eloquent. Can't believe now Mitt Romney looks like some. I mean, my God! All things are relative. Listen to what Mitt Romney wrote today. Okay? I will dispense for now from discussion of the moral character of the president's statements. Whether he intended to or not, what he communicated caused racists to rejoice, minorities to weep, and the vast heart of America to mourn. His apologists strained to explain that he didn't mean what we heard, but what we heard is the reality. And unless it is addressed by the president as such, with unprecedented candor and strength, there may commence an unraveling of our national fabric. This is oratory of the old school. And he's right. And he ain't done. Mitt Romney goes on to say, the leaders of our branches of military service have spoken immediately and forcefully, repudiating the implications of the president's words. Why? Well, in part because the morale and commitment of our forces, made up by men and women of all races, could be in the balance. Our allies around the world are stunned, and our enemies celebrate. America's ability to help secure a peaceful and prosperous world is diminished. And who would want to come to the aid of a country they perceive as racist if ever the need were to arise, as it did after 9/11? In homes across the nation, children are asking their parents what this means. Jews, blacks, Hispanics, Muslims are as much a part of America as whites and Protestants, but today they wonder, where might this lead? To bitterness and tears, or perhaps to anger and violence? The potential consequences are severe in the extreme. Accordingly, the president must take, and then he goes on to say what the president has to do, which of course he will not do. He says he has to come before the people. He has to repudiate his statements. He has to apologize. He has to make clear there's no equivalency between the Nazis, who murdered millions of Jews, and hundreds of thousands of Americans who gave their lives to defeat the Nazi scourge. And he has to be clear that there's no equivalency between Nazis and the counter-demonstrators who were outraged to see Nazis in America's streets. Well, here's his last two lines. This is a defining moment for President Trump. I've never said those two words together. But much more than that, it is a moment that will define America in the hearts of our children. They are watching. Our soldiers are watching. The world is watching. Mr. President, act now for the good of the country. Well, let me see that. But that's a pretty full-throated, yeah, that's a Republican. But he doesn't hold elective office, right? Unbelievable. So I keep thinking, well, maybe something's going to change, but I don't know. Okay, to your emails, folks. Barbara, Elon Musk agrees with me. Musk thinks humanity's most pressing concern is artificial intelligence. It's humanity's biggest existential threat, he says. Yeah, you don't have to be an entrepreneurial genius like Musk to know that. I knew that. I watched 2 more Black Mirrors last night, too. Jesus! Oh, my God, is that series good. Oh, my God, is that series good.
Which ones?
I watched the one you suggested.
Thoughts?
It's good. I mean, it's really, 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 oh, my God. I mean, it just... They're right on the money.
Yeah.
They're right. This series, Black Mirror, shows where, absolutely without even much of a stretch, we could end up in 10 years, 20 years. Absolutely. And let me tell you, it ain't a good place. And no. And it's all because of technology. and artificial intelligence. You can see, because in that regard, man, he was making money. He was making money selling this stuff. Gee whiz, you can't imagine. And then I watched another one that blew me away.
Which one?
I never remember the names, but it was one about, it had drone bumblebees.
I remember that vaguely.
You know, they picked up on the fact that the honeybee population is going down, although I understand that it is rebounding now. Yes. But obviously when this thing was made, it looked like honeybees might disappear. So in order to keep us alive, they created drone honeybees. So, you know, you would see there were flowers and plants, and they looked like little regular honeybees, but if you look closely, they were machines. And oh my God, what those honeybees actually were doing and represent. Oh my God. So I can see what I'm going to be doing for the rest of, to the Andy who said I have a new attitude. I'll tell you what, I am entertaining myself more. That is true. Because I had a choice. I could have been watching Rachel Maddow and wringing my hands, or I could watch this creative terror and wring my hands and be entertained. I chose I chose that. Whatever. Jeez. Chuck writes, why can't I get that off? So do you have to... Yeah, no, I just, once I have something on, I want to go away when I go down and do the next one. Chuck writes, I agree the Democrats need young blood, but whether it's young or old, as long as we can find effective leaders and competent communicators, I'll take any age group. As old as Biden may be. Yeah, well, that's true. Joe's the only one I'd grandfather in. Seriously. As old as Biden may be, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more effective leader and communicator. My biggest regret with the last election was that Hillary stopped him from running. Obama stopped him from running. His own grief stopped him from running. I wish he'd listened to his dying son who said do it. But Chuck says we're getting ahead of ourselves. Where are those brave Democrats willing to take on puppets like Tim Murphy? Well, they're out there. I'm aware of two, one of whom is actively running. We'll end up bringing them in. I don't know if they're viable, and I don't know. And I hope that not so many jump into the fray that they end up just, creating a cacophonous mess and nobody, can sort of rise and take him on. But in our little neck of the woods, that's the guy we need to take down. Milton, I'm trying to get to you, but I can't get this stupid thing off. Okay, I can't. What? Use the arrows? Yeah. Oh, are you ever smart? Milton said, the picture below of the dedication ceremony for the Frederick Douglass statue at Statuary Hall. This is in June of 2013. Biden made speech at that ceremony. Well, then so much for the Wall Street Journal's reportage. So Frederick Douglass is in there. Okay, so then we gotta... Unless he, again, as I said, he might be there, but not one of the official each state gets 2 representatives in this hall. And I guess the federal government and others can place statues in there, but I think maybe what the Journal was doing was saying that no state has put, I don't know. I mean, I'm blowing smoke at this point. I just don't know. But thank you, Milt, as usual. You're right on it. Barbara says that, she's enjoying learning American history right now. It's true. I mean, I feel like I'm learning a lot, too. Did you see that in Tampa, all of their professional teams have put a bunch of money in to help cart away and dislodge the Confederate memorial in the public square in that town? And that the guy who sort of started the ball rolling was Tony Dungy, as good a guy as there is, who does live. After coaching the Buccaneers, he's hung around, and he lives there now. Okay, so that's even like football and basketball teams coming out in opposition. Artists who are going to be honored at the next Kennedy Center Gala, where you go to the White House first and then you sit in those boxes at the Kennedy Center along with the president, and while people laud you on stage. Some of them are refusing to go to the White House. They'll go to the Kennedy Center, but they ain't going to go to the White House. Kevin Durant, of the basketball player, right? He has said he and his teammates will not go to the White House. I mean, we've got a pariah in the White House. We have a pariah. During the period 1880 to 1910, the United Daughters of the Confederacy was one of many groups that were busily raising money to put this mythology in stone and bronze, and to present a romanticized view of slavery and the war in the United States. Historian James McPherson has said that the present-day United Daughters of the Confederacy, still around, actively promotes a white supremacist and neo-Confederate agenda. And a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, Kirk Savage, has written a book called Monument Wars. And in it he says that the United Daughters of the Confederacy has tried to legitimize Jim Crow rule in the American South. Well, any of those, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, I mean, I'll tell you another, group that is equally reprehensible as far as I'm concerned. It's the DAR in the North, the Daughters of the American Revolution. Those folks, they are the ones. Ow, you're special because you trace your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was here at such a time. Big deal. Anyway, I got to tell you, they are the ones who refuse to let Miriam Anderson, a great, extraordinary, internationally renowned opera singer, use their auditorium in Washington, D.C. for a concert. This was in during World War II. They wouldn't let Marian Anderson sing at the DAR in their building because, well, she was black. And so the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, you may recall, said, we'll find another venue for you. And so Marian Anderson stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and she sang there. Powerful.
I have an update about the statues. This is from the official website. It says the National Statuary Hall collection is comprised of statues donated by individual states to honor persons notable in their history. The entire collection consists of 100 statues contributed by 50 states, 2 statues each. Initially, all of the state statues were placed in the National Statuary Hall. As the collection expanded, however, it outgrew the hall, and in 1933, Congress authorized the display of the statues throughout the building for both aesthetic and structural reasons. And I'm going to tweet it out from your account. There's some pretty cool ones. Sacagawea's in there. Thomas Edison. Didn't see Frederick Douglass, but
Okay, but so these others have been added but are not the representatives of the states, which I think is what the Wall Street Journal was going with.
exactly, yeah.
There is no black person representing a state. There are some Native Americans, which is interesting, including Hawaii has, I guess, probably one of their royals from before the statehood. But I don't know. I don't know. What we got here? I came across, and now it seems old. You know, everything gets old so fast in this Trump era that you cannot literally remember the very thing that kept you up at night the night before. I mean, you can't. What was that I was like freaked about? You can't remember. You can't keep up. But I came upon this, and it made me want to weep. This was written by a guy named Alan Zimmerman. He lives in Charlottesville. He wrote it the weekend, that same weekend. He also happens to be a Jew, and he is the president of a congregation there, of a synagogue there. And he writes a little dispatch about what happened at that synagogue that weekend. He says this: at Congregation Beth Israel in Charlottesville, he says, we're deeply grateful for all the support we've received. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families of Heather Heyer and the 2 Virginia State police officers, and with all of the people injured in the attack. And he goes on to say, that is central, that's the focus, but I want to tell you what I and my fellow congregants experienced. On Saturday morning, I stood outside our synagogue with the armed security guard we had hired after the police department refused to provide us with an officer. We did not ask for protection of our property, only of the people who would be worshiping. 40 congregants were there that morning. And here's what I witnessed during that time. For half an hour, 3 men dressed in fatigues and armed with semi-automatic rifles stood across the street from our synagogue. Had they tried to enter, I don't know what I could have done to stop them, but I couldn't take my eyes off them either. I guess it was the presence of the armed guard that we had hired that deterred them. Several times, parades of Nazis passed, shouting, "There's a synagogue!" followed by chants of Sig Heil and all kinds of other delightful anti-Semitic language. Some carried flags with swastikas and other Nazi symbols. When services ended, my heart broke as I had to advise the congregants that I believed it would be safer for them to leave the synagogue through the back entrance rather than through the front, and to please not go alone, to go in groups. This is 2017, he writes, in the United States of America. We soon learned that Nazi websites had posted a call to burn our synagogue. I sat with one of our rabbis and wondered whether we should go back to the synagogue to protect the building. What could we do? we decided to take a precautionary step and remove our Torahs. Those are the scrolls that Jews read from when they worship. They are the 5 books of Moses, what Christians call the Old Testament. Jews don't call it the Old Testament. It is the Testament. It is the Torah, okay? And what they did is they removed all of their Torahs, including one that had been saved from the Holocaust. And he said, imagine he's carrying out this Torah that had survived the Holocaust. And he says, again, this is in America, 2017. Finally, we felt we had no choice but to cancel what's called the Havdalah service as the Sabbath ends. It had been announced on a Facebook page, and we were fearful that the Nazis might be aware of the event. And again, we sought police protection, not a battalion, just a single officer, but we were told, just cancel your service. He says local police faced an unprecedented problem that day, but make no mistake, Jews were a specific target of these groups. And despite nods of understanding from officials about our concerns, we were left pretty much to our own devices. But then he says, I just want to say that there were other moments that stood out. A 30-year naval veteran, John Aguilar, who's not Jewish, took it upon himself to stand watch over the synagogue throughout the services Friday evening and Saturday, along with the armed guard. He just felt he should. Several non-Jews came to the service to show solidarity, though a number of our own congregants, particularly our elderly ones, stayed home, telling me they were afraid. A frail elderly woman approached me Saturday morning as I stood on the steps in front of our sanctuary. She was crying. She told me, I'm a Roman Catholic. She wanted to stay and watch over the synagogue with us. At one point she asked, why do they hate you? I had no answer. We've been asking ourselves for thousands of years. And at least a dozen complete strangers stopped by as we stood in front of the synagogue Saturday to ask if we wanted them to also stay and stand with us. It goes on and on and on. But that's just one little thing that happened in Charlottesville when the Nazis came to town. 2017, the United States of America. And the fact that these hateful purveyors of hate, of genocide, the fact that they in this United States of America can walk through the streets armed to the teeth is mind-boggling. And in fact, it's forced the ACLU, thank God, who had defended this group when there was an attempt to move its demonstration. They went to court, the ACLU, because they see it as a free speech issue, and said, no, they get to do it there. There's no reason why they should be moved. The ACLU, I think, coming under a great deal of pressure, has rethought who it will represent and has decided the First Amendment that it represents does not allow for menacing people with submachine guns to have the freedom of the First Amendment. The ACLU is not going to represent anybody that is openly threatening violence and or armed to the teeth. That's a good thing that has happened. Wow. May you live in interesting times. So I guess that's it. I mean, there's so much, guys. And I'm so sorry that you can't call in. But soon, we'll get back to having a phone system. Okay, I think that's it. Am I pretty much done? Is it 11? Yep. It is? Okay, I just want to quickly look and make sure that I'm not seeing any... What the hell? Why can't I get back to my just inbox, huh? Huh? Oh, come on. Inbox. I hate this stuff. Excuse me. Okay. Henry. Okay. Wait. I'm like a stereotype of an old person, right? It's embarrassing. Henry writes, Lynn Bernstein, I guess that'd be Carl, right, was on CNN, and he said the following. Many members of Congress, many of our military leaders, many in our intelligence community who I have spoken to, and I know other reporters have spoken to, understand and are beginning to comprehend that the underlying story here is a lack of confidence in the abilities and character of the President of the United States of America. Duh. This president is not in control of the presidency in a way that it is functioning, and that has got our leaders worried. Well, duh! Henry says he was insinuating that we could be looking at a military coup. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know. We're in for something, because it is conceivable that Trump will not be in the White House come, let's say, Christmas. I don't know. He ain't having any fun. It's starting to hurt his business. He's knee-deep in legal situations. I don't know. Gigi Rice, so glad you're back. Well, I think Romney's letter was quite eloquent. I do wonder what exactly does he want the president to do. He wants him to apologize and to he wants him to do what, of course, he won't and he's incapable of doing. Okay, so in that regard, it's just bullshit. The only acceptable action, Gigi says, at this point is for Trump to leave office. Absolutely agree with you. Why don't Republicans with spine, there aren't any, just come out and say that? Also, what do you make of Bannon's interview with him? He is much too media savvy to have forgotten to ask. Oh, please, yeah. He's playing the game. They're all playing a game. And Milton has corrected what he had written before. Frederick Douglass statue is not at Statuary Hall as a representative from a specific state. He's the figure who represents Washington, D.C., which only gets one. Because, they're not, really part of America for some reason. Okay, so I think that's it. Hey, thank you guys so much. It's great to be back, although I'm missing the two-way nature of our usual meetings. But I'll just hold down the fort till we get ourselves resituated in a studio. Thanks for hanging there with me, and have a good weekend.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.